But as your business grows, I would argue it's more important to practice self-care and actually put emphasis on founder well-being. My name is Marvin Lubega, co-founder of Go1, an Endeavour entrepreneur. We were selected in 2017 in Malaysia at the ISP there. Our company, Go1, we help organizations unlock a positive potential through a love for learning, through our B2B platform. As founders, we often forget about the importance of taking care of ourselves. It's almost perverse when you think about it, You start your business and the first thing an investor says is, okay, but can you build a founding team? Can you hire other people? And the focus almost as you grow becomes more on other people than yourself because you want to be not the core person limiting your business's growth. But as your business grows, I would argue it's more important to practice self-care and actually put emphasis on founder well-being. And it's often we take that for granted because we're meant to be leaders who are meant to be strong, aren't meant to be fallible, aren't meant to show weakness. And it's about being intentional about that self-care. And so if I think about my journey as an entrepreneur, so I'm very big on having co-founders because, when I have an up day, Andrew has a good day and we balance each other out. But in the same vein, my co-founder lives in Australia, I live in South Africa. And so we aren't necessarily seeing each other day to day as sparring partners. And so the question then comes down to what does that well-being look like, not only as a daily discipline, but what are some of the things that have helped me in my journey to make sure that I remain Zen, as it were. And so something I'm very intentional about is, one, not being afraid to allow the organization to also grow beyond me. Something which we as entrepreneurs often say is we want our businesses to grow exponentially. But the question is, if you want your business to grow exponentially, but you aren't necessarily growing yourself, then how are you able to support that growth? You actually may be retarding that growth. And so for me, it's, we're a learning company education, but it's about saying, how am I doing things that stimulate me? So making sure that I'm learning new things, whether that's important for the job or not, it's about saying, what enthuses me and gets me excited? Because how I show up is important. And it's okay to say, I want to learn something that doesn't necessarily have direct value to the business, as it were. And so for me, I love the outdoors. I'm a Boy Scout, I've been so for many years. And so me learning a new skill around, hiking or outdoor photography is what actually allows me to find my happy place and learn beyond, learning, different parts of go-to-market scale and trying how to scale my different channels and so forth. What I found during the pandemic was an opportunity to be vulnerable with your team. And Brené Brown says it well, and shout out to Brené, she's done some amazing things out there. But during the time, so in Go1 we train about 5 million people and about 2 million odd minutes, I think it is, at a certain period of time. And what was quite fascinating during the pandemic was the most popular course across our platform was stress and anxiety awareness. Imagine, in the heart of the pandemic, people were working on how to work remotely, how to scale teams remotely. But the biggest thing by managers was stress and anxiety awareness. So you remember, our people are also human as well. So we're also human. So we're allowed to also, be stressed, to have anxiety, to be depressed. And so it's okay to put your hand up and say, look, I'm not okay. And whether that's necessarily with your leadership team, whether that's with your mentor, and again, to the point, make sure you have that support community around yourself. It may not be your board, it may not be your co-founder, it may not even be your romantic partner. It's about saying, who do I go to for certain things? And have that there. Not because you're feeling something in this moment, but that at some point you may need someone to reach out to for that particular point in conversation. And so it requires you to be vulnerable, but to have that support structure being in place. I think for me, the final thing is to not necessarily lose sight of how important your health is to the business. Often you may value the business based on the numbers you achieve as the business and not necessarily your own personal health. What I've come to realize is that there's a very strong correlation with my own well-being and the success of my business. And so often as a founding team, we often check in with each other, especially in our big meetings, saying, look, how are you doing today? Not work-related, but how are you doing? And just being able to have the way of checking in with yourself, because the worst thing is not knowing when you're in a bad place, because you feel like you're over the moon, you've closed a big deal, but how are you? And just having that accountability within your teams around checking in is so important. So I think one, it's about realizing that your importance or your well-being is important for an organization, even more so as your business grows. Two, it's about having the right community around you, even outside of your work, that can enable you to access that And 3, it's important for you to be able to be vulnerable enough to access that community as you go through your journey, and realizing that your well-being is actually strongly correlated to the well-being of your company.